Our Across the Aisle segment tonight, it's not every day that churches threaten violence against their enemies, but that's the state of race relations in America. A St. Louis police officer is on trial for the killing of a black man following a high-speed car chase, and a group of black clergy members are threatening violence if the police officer is not convicted. Watch this.
I'm telling you right now, we're organized in a way that you're going to see mass disruption, be it plane, train, and automobile. No matter what the game is, the game will stop. No matter what the business is. See, this is not just downtown. This is not just Ferguson. This is the whole region.
We want justice.
The dozens of protesters were joined by clergy at the rally on the steps of the Carnahan Courthouse.
Let me send a message to St. Louis. The days of division in our community is gone. We stand with these activists.
Their letter to the judge himself reads, and I quote here, "Any decision rendered by you other than a guilty verdict will make you liable for any ensuing unrest or acts of aggression. In biblical terms, the blood will be on your hands." With me now, former Georgia State Representative and Democratic strategist, LaDon Jones. LaDon, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
All right, LaDon, this is a sticky case. I mean, it's a tragic case all around. Someone died. That always makes it a tragedy, regardless of whether it's justified or unjustified. But this was quite something to me, reading about this group of preachers who are standing outside the courthouse, who wrote a letter to the judge saying that any acts of aggression will be on the judge's hands if he renders a verdict other than guilty. And my question to you is, should the threat of unrest or the threat of aggression, should that influence a court's judgment or a judge's decision in any way, shape, or form?
In legal sense, absolutely not. It should not sway the judge. A judge should make a decision on the facts of the case, period. But I don't think that's what they're trying to say. Really, what I believe these pastors were trying to do is get the attention of the rest of this country. Make sure that people are watching what this judge does, and so letting him be aware to make sure that he is doing exactly what he has agreed and promised and took an oath to do when he became a judge.
Well, I wish that's what they said. I wish they had said, listen, the eyes of the nation are upon you, and we hope that now more than ever you will consider the facts of this case and let our system of justice, help you make your decision on behalf of the people here. That's not what they said. They said any acts of aggression will be on your hands if you render a decision anything other than guilty here. I mean, I don't understand if the threat of unrest should not influence a judge. What else could they possibly be doing? What are they advocating for then?
Well, what they're advocating for is what we're doing right now, Liz, is that we're talking about this case. Had they said something nice and sweet, like you suggested that they say earlier, you probably wouldn't even cover this on your show, as would many other people not have covered this. And so they're using the media for the sensationalism that they like in hopes that they will take a close look at this particular case. Many times when you hear these excessive force cases, there's always, well, this person did this. Well, in this case, it is clear cut. The officer chased after the gentleman. The officer shot at him 6 inches away and then planted his own firearm, which is ridiculous, on him. We need to pay attention to these types of cases so that we can ensure justice is done in all of those cases.
Right, and be that as it may, I actually think these black preachers are distracting from if there was wrongdoing that was done, and I'll wait until the verdict of the case. But even if that is so, even if this police officer should be convicted of murder, the threat of unrest and violence against him should not be the reason he comes to this verdict. They're distracting. It reflects on them. It reflects on the left, to be honest, that they're justifying violence. They think that violence is okay as long as they believe that it is morally on their side. That, to me, is so troubling, and I don't understand why the American people aren't talking about that.
Well, because there's a bigger issue. These are reverends or ministers who are exercising their First Amendment right to speak up on an issue that's important to them. But that's not really the issue here. The issue is there's been a problem with excessive force in all of our police departments, that the courts and other places have been complicit in looking the other way. And this is one of those cases, like the many cases that have come before us, that frankly it was the fact that there was people speaking up and protesting and raising their voices that got your attention. Inside the black community, there are discussions about uncles and brothers and people being pulled over and treated wrongly all the time. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I handle these cases where police officers take money from people who are innocent and forfeit it to the police department. What we need to happen is for more people, a wider audience, for the right to know that these things are going on. And don't be mad at these ministers because they use tough rhetoric. Be mad at our justice system and ensure that our DAs, that our police officers, the good ones, which most of them are standing up and saying we will not be quiet in the face of this injustice.
Right, I understand what you're saying, and I know I am going to take umbrage with what these ministers said, because what you're saying makes sense to me. What you're saying is reasonable. What you're saying is passionate. What you're saying would draw the attention of the American people. What you're saying is not what these ministers are saying. What these ministers are saying is if you do not render the verdict that we believe, mob rule believes is right, you then are responsible for violence that we essentially are condoning. Do you think it is the right thing to do to bring attention to an issue to cause violence? Because, that is the definition of domestic terrorism.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but since the 60s with Emmett Till and so many other African Americans that died at the hands of police, and then in particular, this case goes more than this police officer. This was covered up by the police department for many years until citizens looked into this. And so what they are expressing by alleging violence or saying that, telling what is essentially a fact, if the judge does for whatever reason, whether it's because he thinks the law says such or because he's being biased, if the court decides something other than guilt when the evidence is clearly on the side of guilt, then people are going to continue to raise their voices. They were
right, but
you
haven't said no to me yet. You haven't answered and said no. Threatening violence is not the way to correct an issue that they believe exists in our criminal system. Do you can you condemn that? Can you condemn a call for violence and say no, we should not be using violence as a way to bring attention to something, even if it's a wrongdoing?
Because we're talking about it right now in this very moment, I can't condemn it because it got your attention and it got the attention of so many other people around the country. Now, I hope that these ministers will not actually uplift violence if there's something that occurs, but I do encourage them to do whatever it takes to get the attention of the rest of America so that you guys can stand on our side and stop excessive force at its root.
I don't know who you're talking about when you say you guys.
Yes, I condone saying that.
I don't know who you're talking about when you say you guys. I stand on the side of law and justice. I stand on the side of every person is equally and protected under the law. I stand on the side of violence is not the answer to a wrongdoing. The answer to wrongdoing is going through our system of law and justice. And if the law is incorrect, then you run for office, talk to your senator, your congressman, and change that law. So I don't know who you're talking about when you say you guys.
Well, you guys, because earlier you said that you're surprised at the left. This is a bad showing on the left for condoning this, but it's a sad showing on the right for being quiet in the face of all of these things that are going on, to focus your attention on what someone said versus focusing your attention on what this police officer did, which was murder. So when I say you guys, I mean the right. We need you to speak up. We know you think this is wrong, but why are you so quiet on it? Why are your main concerns Antifa and Black Lives Matter instead of saying, you know what, these people wouldn't be out here?
Well, I'll tell you why, because I'll tell you why my concern is Antifa, because Antifa attacks police officers. They're using violence against innocent people. My concern with the Black Lives Matter movement is that they don't care about black lives, or they'd speak up for the over 4,000 black men who are killed by other black men every year instead of talking about the 112 black men who are killed by police officers every year. They're hypocritical, and the founders of the Black Lives Matter, their goal is to tear down the rule of law in America. What they do is they tear down police officers to tear down the rule of law. That's why they idolize people like Assata Shakur, the cop killer. That is my issue. When you look at the facts, of course there are bad apples among the police force, and I call them out every time that happens. But what happens is they stereotype police to make it seem like if you put on a blue uniform, that makes you essentially racist. And if you look at the data objectively without emotion, that's not true, and that's my problem with it. LaDon?